Hello and welcome to the second video in this series, Mathematics of COVID-19. My name is Greg Einfeld and this video is brought to you by Lime Actuarial and Price Wizard. And if you're enjoying these videos, feel free to follow us on social media on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, where you'll find all of this series of videos displayed. So in the first video, we looked at the reduction in the number of cases that we'd been seeing, and I predicted that that number of cases was peaking. This is where we were, where the vertical blue line is here at the 31st of March, and we can see that that trend has continued, which is really good news. This is Australian new cases recorded every day. So good news that that's reduced. But I did say that there were three caveats around that, one of which is the data may be imperfect. The second one, which I'm going to speak more about in this video, is the difference between the transmissions coming from overseas and the community transmissions. And then thirdly, that part of this is due to the restrictions that have been put in place, and that all needs to continue if we're going to see this trend continue. Now, if you look what's happened since I recorded that previous video in the last week, we've seen the number of new cases reducing from about the 300 per day mark in Australia down to 137 yesterday, which is the lowest number of cases that we've had now for over 2 weeks. So clearly things are heading in the right direction. But what I do want to touch on in this video and focus on is the difference between the transmissions coming from overseas and the community transmissions. So let's have a look at that, and we're going to focus on New South Wales and Victoria. And the reason for that is, firstly, those are the two states with the most cases and of course the largest populations, and also that's where the best data comes from. The data in the other states isn't really all that great, and so there's not much that we can glean from it. Now we're starting to see calls now. It's time to ease the shutdown because of this trend that I just identified. And I think it's important that we have the debate. After all, we are a democracy, and it's good that we debate things. In my opinion, it's a little bit too soon to be easing the shutdown, and I want to show you why in this video. So this is the total number of new cases that we're seeing in New South Wales day by day, and you can see that clearly it has peaked. It peaked in late March, and the trend has been down over the last week or maybe even week and a half since then. So that's all good news. Now there are two drivers of this, and one is what's happening from the number of cases that are coming from overseas, and the second one is what's happening in the locally transmitted cases. So we're going to look at each of these in turn. First of all, overseas. So you can see here that we've seen really big reductions in the number of cases coming from overseas, and this is because the government has been very tough on closing the borders and who's been allowed back into the country. So that's good news. There's an argument that maybe they should have done this a little bit sooner and we would have seen the curve flatten off even earlier. Nonetheless, we are where we are. So you can see that that's come down strongly, and that has been the predominant driver of the reduction in cases. So the good news is that's come down quickly. I suppose the other side of that, the not so good news, is that once you get this number of cases coming from overseas down to almost zero, it can't reduce any further. So if we're going to see further reductions, it has to come from the number of cases that are being transmitted locally. So let's have a look at what's happening there. So don't worry too much about whether these are coloured blue or green or orange the total size of each bar is the total number of cases that have been transmitted locally. And what you can see is it seems to have peaked back on around the 25th of March. Maybe there were some anomalies in the data. Maybe it was the 27th of March. It does seem to have peaked, but it's not coming down that quickly. And in the last week, it's bounced around a bit, but the numbers have been pretty steady. So in my view, it's a little bit too early to start getting excited about this. We need to see a downward trend in the number of community transmitted cases before we can claim any victory here. So a little bit too early to get excited. Let's have a look at this for Victoria. So we'll look at the same three charts again. So this is the total number of cases. Once again, it peaked in late March. It's been coming down reasonably consistently ever since. Let's look at the overseas acquired cases. That's this chart here. Same situation. It's peaked. Clearly that's come down and down to the point where it's getting not quite at zero, but close to zero. And if the trend continues, it will get down to zero. So that's all good news. And then finally, let's look at the locally transmitted cases. And certainly the chart appears to show that it has peaked and they've come down in the last 2 days. But one summer doesn't make a swallow, as they say. Or have I got that the wrong way around? One swallow doesn't make a summer. 2 days of low cases is good, but we really need to see that for an extended period before we start to get too excited there. So once again, in Victoria, I don't think we're quite at the point yet where we can declare victory and say that the locally transmitted cases are coming down in any consistent manner. So that's what we're seeing here, the split between the overseas and the locally transmitted cases. In my view, we still need to be vigilant in following all of the restrictions that the government is putting in place. We don't want to just see the locally transmitted cases leveling off. We want to see them coming down. And the sooner we can all see that, then the sooner we can start to get our lives back together again, and the more lives we're going to save in the meantime, and the more jobs we're going to save in the longer term as well. So let's all be vigilant with that. As I said, if you are interested, please comment on social media. I'm happy to respond to any comments, and please follow us on social media, and then you'll see more of these videos going forward. Thanks very much.